Okay, so we are ready to start talking about lists in Python. And lists are like arrays in other languages, but they're a lot nicer than arrays, I will say. And if you've worked with arrays, you'll notice that lists are just a lot easier to work with, more sophisticated. So, but the goal is the same. You want to store a bunch of things all together, a bunch of items all together, such as these here. So I've created a list called smoothies. We're going to pretend we're writing a program for a smoothie cafe. And so my list is called smoothies, and you just open up a pair of square brackets and then add your items in comma delimited format like I've done here. So like arrays in other languages, the items in your list are indexed behind the scenes, and it is a zero-based indexing system. So the Blueberry Bliss, for example, has an index of 0. Lean Machine has an index of 1, and so on. So then Paleo Punch has an index of 9. So I'm going to print these smoothies. There are better ways to print from a list, which we'll look at later, but for now this is just kind of the quick and easy way to do it. So we'll just do this just so we can look at the values as I start playing around with this. So in this video I'm just going to whiz through some useful functions and methods for dealing with lists and specifically adding new items to a list. So for example, if I wanted to figure out how many items are in a list, now I know I've got 10 in this one, but let's say I didn't know. You can use the len function and just pass the list there, and then I have some code already typed out to print this. So if I'm just going to put that in there, the how many. Okay, so the len function is going to return a count of items in the list. And then I can just drop that into the F string there, and we'll see there are 10 smoothies on today's menu. I didn't mean to put the period on the 2 lines later. Okay, so there is that, the len function. And I could have just dropped it into the F string as well. That's how I originally had it. Okay, we don't necessarily need that in a separate variable. So we can see the len function. That's quite useful, actually, knowing how many items are in a list. So let's talk about appending or adding items to a list. So for example, let's say the cafe has a new flavor and I want to add it to the menu. I can use the append method, and we can just pass it the item that we want to append. And by append we mean it's added to the bottom of the list, or it'll be the last thing in the list. So let me go ahead and print the list again after I've appended cinnamon fig to the bottom of the list, so we can just see that. I'm just going to get a blank line in there. Okay, so we have the cinnamon fig. You can see it's been appended. So append is good for just adding an item to the bottom of the list or the end of the list. Now, what if I want to add an item somewhere else in the list? Not at the end necessarily. Then I can use the insert method, and this is very useful. So let's say I want to add a new flavor, rainbow fruit, to the front of the list, or the top of the list. I can use the insert method. This needs an index, okay? So if I provide an index of 0, the new flavor is going to be added to the beginning of the list, or the front of the list. So we'll go ahead and print that. Okay, you can see it went to the front of the list with the insert. And I mean, so you can just insert an item anywhere. You can put it in the middle of the list if you want, or whatever. Okay, so there is that. And then, just talking about like accessing individual items from the list, you can just reference, and this is very array-ish. Like if you've worked with arrays in other languages, then you know that often you will just reference the individual item. They're called elements when you're dealing with arrays. That's a term that's not really used much in Python. We use the term item. The list has items, whereas the array has elements. But whatever, it's still like kind of the same concept. So you can access the individual item with the index in square brackets. So this would print the third item in the list, because the lists are zero-based, indexed with zero-based indexing. And so this is going to print, I believe it's lean machine. Yeah, lean machine. So yeah, because that's the third element, or the third item, excuse me, in the list. So anyway, well, oh, you know what? As we're on the topic of accessing individual items, I want to mention it's a two-way street. I can get data out of the list, obviously, but I can also put data in and overwrite what's already in there. So let's say I wanted to change that third item from lean machine to green machine. Again, just access that by its index of 2 in this case. Provide the new value, as I'm doing here, and we'll see if that works. Okay, and it did. So yeah, there's your first list, and in the next video we will talk about removing items from a list.